Okay, good morning. One second, what's the name? What's the name, Morty? Today's share is sponsored, Lilu Nishmas, Malka Basar Gershon, breakfast as well. Okay, I said we're going to talk about the story of the Zohar today. Now, anybody who knows a little bit about the academics and their stuff with the Zohar and all their bikairis and antis and etc. So that's the part that I'm not really going to talk about. I just want to start with one nakuda addressing that, and then we'll move on to some of the Zohar discussion. Some of the various academics throughout the generations, in particular the Maskilim, took major beef with the Zohar and said the Zohar is not from Shimon Yochai, the Zohar is Christian, the Zohar is made up. There's like a lot of different bikairis. They had rayas like this, rayas like that. Now, to me, I'm not going to go through all the kashas and the rayas and the terutzim. A lot of them are not important, b'chlal. But what I just want to say is one thing that resonates with me that maybe will resonate with some of you as well. The goyin. So the real answer is that all of our gedolim kemat pe'achad throughout the dairis. Of course, there's exceptions. There was different fights, different bits, different pieces. But by and large, our gedolim of all varieties samchu yedeiim very, very strongly on the Zohar and believed the Zohar to be from Shimon Yochai, and took it extremely seriously. And ad kedei kach that maybe this is a continuation for a different week, but the Zohar and the Kabbalah b'chlal migrated into halacha, became a big part of halacha. But the goyin in particular is something I want to zoom in on and focus on. The goyin, as we all know, was very, very, very Isaac in Girsayis and Tfusim of the Gemara and of all the Sifrei Tanam and Amiram. The goyin changed, I don't know what the exact number is, but hundreds, probably thousands of amendments to Shas, to different Midrashim, to different Sifrei Kabbalah, etc., to change everything, to make it accurate. Now, lest you think that this was just like a casual avodah for the goyin, meaning as he was learning, he would just like jot down on the side of his Gemara, Nichta B'tzidana, I think it should be this or that. I want to read you a little bit from different people who wrote about the goyin's Girsayis changes and show you with what severity the goyin took it, in particular when it comes to Kabbalah. And from there, I think you could learn to how the goyin treated this thing, how the goyin looked at this. Now, this is like I call this an accidental Musa Sefer. It's a sefer called Hadr Salio. It's a collection of all the Haggadamos that were written to the goyin's Chiburim and some Hespedim that were given on him. It's an accidental Musa Sefer because it's not meant to tell you anything. It doesn't tell you anything. But if you just read it, it's full of what you could count as Musar. Now, in the beginning of the Hakdama from his son Reb Avram to the goyin's Pirish on Shnei Salio and Zroim, he writes as follows. He writes that the goyin learned for a long time. Then he says as follows. The goyin learned when he's Zois Chazisi V'Asapera. He says, this I saw and I want to tell over to you. Be'ez Iris Me'oifel Higia. B'lasor Tayis Atvos V'Asay from Shnaflu B'Safar B'Sifri. When the goyin was making his effort to edit and amend the Sifra and the Sifri from all the mistakes and errors that had fallen into it. V'Teiseftes, Pirkei D'Velazav, Yerushalmi, Talmud Bavli, Seder Olam. He says, Nasu Panav Shcheris Ka'iriv. His face became black like a crow, like a raven. V'Nasa Achzari Al Banav B'nei Beisei. And he became cruel to his family and his household, meaning he wouldn't look or talk to anybody. His Banav Layada, his Achav Lahikir, his children he didn't know, his family he didn't know. Ube'azrei Hashem Lahasik Shmaitza Emes Lamitai. And when he was able to make an amendment or a correction that he felt was Emes Lamitai, Tzahavu Panav Bin Ba'ar Sheba. His face lit up from the joy of it, and this is like counterintuitive. He didn't eat from several days because he was just fed by his simcha of having made a proper amendment, having come to the truth in one of these Sifrei Tanam and Amiram. He had no hana, he barely slept. Again, he continues on. But just this little piece of here where he says the goyin's incredible amount of effort that he put into making an amendment, a simple change to any one of the svarim that he was amending, that he was editing to make sure they're perfect, and simcha that he has. Now, if you fast forward to the Hakdama of Rav Chaim Volozhin on the Sefer Safra Tzniusa, which is a Kabbalistic Sefer that the goyin edited and the goyin wrote a Pirish to. Now, it happens to be, if you want to read if you're going to choose one of these Hakdamas to read, that's the one I would recommend. Read the Hakdama of the Safra Tzniusa of Rav Chaim Volozhin. It's incredible. But in there he says, V'shamati mefurish yoytzi mipiv hakadosh. He says, I heard mefurish from the goyin's mouth. The goyin was never willing or able to make a change to anything that was from Nistaris, anything Kabbalistic, anything Zohar related, until he found many cross references that told him that what he was doing is right. Ulapa'amim, he says, Ad Me'eh v'chamishim mekaymis. He waited until he had 150, data points that told him that he had to make this change before he made this change. So, and this is in the shtickle over here, Chaim V'Lunch is writing how the Gaon, was with chazer over certain parts of the Kabbalah hundreds of times in a row, certain parts of the Zohar. He says b'yichud b'girsayis hanekiyas asher himtzi b'Zohar. The perfect girsis that the Gaon was busy making sure the Zohar had. Zohar Kadosh v'raya mehemna v'tikunim. Chaser v'yaser, something missing or adding in, v'chalaf mishur l'shura, a line that was switched, midaf l'daf, gam l'kamadafin, lo yu'umin ki yishur yigi yosef harbi v'atzum shayilai. You can't even imagine the amount of effort and avoid that the guy put into this. He would count and weigh each ice until he was able from Shemai to make a new girsa. It's much more about this, etc. So I'm just showing the guy who was probably the world's greatest expert in the textual analysis of Sifrei Tanam and Amiram, I would say. That's probably the right technical way to say it, the academic way to say it. Probably the biggest expert in textual analysis. There was probably no one for hundreds of years before him or hundreds of years after him who knew the entire length and breadth of Sifrei Tanam and Amiram, Bishleimusam, who could tell you them like Ashrei, backwards and forwards, every ice, every letter. And the guy took tremendous amounts of effort, particular effort, even more effort than he spent on the Gemaras and Sifri and Sifra, Tesefti, Yerushalmi, etc., editing and amending the Zohar with this need to have cross-corroboration from 100 places or 150 places. So to me, this always resolves any possible critique that an academic could have, a kasha thing. Even if I don't know the answer, I'm pretty sure the guy would have known the answer. And it's not, it's just not impressive. Meaning it's not a big deal to be semach on such expertise for such a matter. Now, putting that aside, let's talk a little bit about the Zohar itself. We're coming to Reb Shimon ben Yochai's yard site, according to many Messiahs, and the Zohar, in the end of the Zohar in Parshas Hazinu, brings something called the Idra Zuta, which is a description of Shimon ben Yochai's life and the Seidus that was said on the day that he was nifter, and his tzivoit, his Talmud Reb Abba, that he should be the one who writes down the thoughts of the Zohar HaKadosh, and that's how the Zohar came to be. Now, why was there critique of the Zohar B'chlal? Why is this something that's controversial in the first place? Is because the Zohar was a sefer that was hidden away for over 1,000 years. Reb Shimon ben Yochai is nifter in, let's call it the year 150. I'm not exactly, I could be off by a few years. He's nifter be'erach in the tkuf of the year 150. The Zohar itself wasn't published, wasn't found B'chlal until the late 1200s, until let's call it 1275, 1280s, when the Zohar started being published in Kuntresim, and wasn't actually published in print until the 1300s and then later. So the Zohar took over 1,000-year break from circulation. So in contrast to maybe some of the other Sifrei Tanam and Amiram that we have that we rely upon, which Klal Yisrael always had a Messiah one way or the other, they had some of it or all of it in different parts of Klal Yisrael, throughout the Deiros. The Zohar was hidden away for over 1,000 years, till it was found by someone by the name of Moshe de Leon. He was a Spanish Makubal. How exactly he found it is itself, if you look in the various different svarim that write about it, the Mitzvah Lekesef and the Chidah and others, there's different legends. Maybe he found it in the library, maybe he found it in a Ksav Yad from someone, maybe the Ramban was mailing it to his son who lived somewhere else and it got lost, it ended up by him. There's a lot of different ways how the Zohar, which was only a Ksav Yad, it was only like something that was passed from man to man, it was a secret that was passed from man to man, ended up becoming public, ending up he found it and published it, but he found it, he published it, and it caught on relatively quickly. It started spreading like wildfire, people liked it, and yes, there was some who pushed back and said yes or no, it's not old, it is old, it's real, it's fake, it has additions, it has, over the years there was many Talmidei Chachamim who edited it, the Yavitz and the Goyin and the Arizal, many people who made modifications to try to make it, to perfect the Zohar HaKadosh. But because the Zohar HaKadosh was in hiding for over 1,000 years, it got this cloud of is it of who, of what, or whatever. And this is just Akdam over here. Now, why was it in hiding for 1,000 years? Why did Klal Yisrael not have it? Why were we Zeichet to have it? And Rishonim, the Rambam and Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, whenever Zeichet have the Zohar. This is something that many address, and each one, Ishkefi Ma'alale, everyone says his own derech and why that would be. The Chidah says something interesting, which I thought was interesting. The Chidah says that part of the Gzeres HaGalus that Klal Yisrael got after the Churban was it's based on a Chazal that 1,000 years of darkness. It says 1,000 years of darkness included the Zohar. Klal Yisrael couldn't have the Zohar for that 1,000 years, after the Churban. After it was 1,000 years after the Churban, then the Zohar was allowed, and it started mi Pela amongst a small group of Mekubalim, some in Ashkenaz like the Rekeach and Yehuda Chassid, and some Svard like the Ravid and Rabbi Yitzchak Saginar and the Ramban and Rabbi Yitzchak the Menako and even Tillit managed to break its way out of that little circle of Mekubalim who knew it and went to become wide scale. Took time. Others say that Fakert Ardar, because of the Chashkas Galus, because we're so deep into the Galus, is why we needed it. Meaning a dar like ours, the darker it is and the deeper into Galus is why we need it. Some Great Chassidish Rebbe said the reason why it came out is because the Haskalah was coming and also Tzekvir was coming. Klal Yisrael needed a deeper, more rich understanding of Yiddishkeit. The just call it cold Yiddishkeit of halacha wouldn't have been enough to hold Klal Yisrael through the dark days of Haskalah and challenges that were coming to Klal Yisrael. Many different, it's literally every person, kafi his derech, says his way of why the Zohar was hidden away for all this time. Now, I want to talk about one particular fight about the Zohar that happened very, very recently, relatively speaking, a long time after the Zohar was on the scene, that involved many, many Gedolei Olam. Well, let's go into that a little bit. It's a fascinating fight. I don't think anybody would have heard of Sana. If I would have said Sana 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, whatever, before the Houthis started doing what they're doing, nobody would know what Sana is. But now Sana was back on the map again, or off the map, depends how you look at it, because they're back in the news. But in Sana in 1915, in the Yemeni Kehillah of Sana in 1915, there was a tremendous fight. Sana was, in Yemen, they lived very isolated and separated from the rest of Klal Yisrael. And they had really their own minhagim. They were called, a lot of them were Rambamistim, is what we would call them. Very Rambam based. They paskin like the Rambam. They held like the Rambam in all regards. Sayin is Ashkafa, Sayin is an halacha. In every way, the Rambam was their Meir Derech. They had a few other things that made it in over the Derech to them, but overall, they were a Rambam based Kehillah. At some point in the 1800s, the French, the Alliance, the French Maskilim rather, started going to Yemen and all these North African countries because France owned, colonized these North African countries. Yemen's not even North Africa, but it's right around the tip of it. And the French started getting involved in it. And Memela, certain other streams of Yiddishkeit started entering, Saila Tov and Saila Mutav, meaning the Yemeni Jews became exposed to the rest of Yiddishkeit, for better or for worse. They started corresponding with the Eretz Yisrael Dika, they started corresponding with some Europeans, etc. And there became a lot of different schools of thought within the Kehillas, and they broke up into a few different Kehillas, some what we would call more mainstream, which is today, incidentally, what a lot of Yemeni Jews are, meaning they might daven with their Nusach HaSeder, but they go to relatively regular yeshivas, and they learn relatively regular limudim. They're not what you would call Rambamistim anymore. They're not isolated in that way. They're more connected. Now, in any case, one of the biggest fights that happened over there was in the year 1915, they split off between a new group that was called the Dardim. Dardim, I might be pronouncing it slightly wrong, but Dardim is an amalgamation of two words. It's Dar Deim, the Dar of those who know, like, of Deis. Dardim is what they were called. And they were led by, actually, the letters that are written against them, Mezalzel, the letters that are written against them, called them, led by Yichya, Yichya, and Yichya. The three Yichyas. That's like a 1915 versions of like the Three Stooges type of joke. Like the Yichya, Yichya, Yichya. They were far from Stooges though. They were all tremendous Talmidei Chachamim and very highly, highly intelligent people. But they had this idea that the Yemeni Jews had become too fakishift with Kabbalah, with all these different minhagim and different things that were made up that seemed strange to them, and they were what they were trying to do in their mind was return to the roots of what Yemeni Yiddishkeit was really supposed to be, a very non-Kabbalistic, very straightforward halacha, Rambam-based, even an Ashkafa type of way of looking at Yiddishkeit, and they made major pushback against the Kabbalah. Now, one of their main targets, and this is what really got them in trouble, this is what put them out of business, so one of their main targets was, they said the Zohar was written by a Catholic. It has nothing to do with Reb Shimon Yochai. It's written by a Catholic and should be mamish burnt. It should be nidin l'sreifa. Now, this is what these various rabbis said. The most famous of them becomes a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Yechia Kapach. Now, the reason why he was probably the leader, even though he wasn't the oldest, he was probably the leader. Now, the reason why this fight lingers even into the modern era is because he had a famous grandson, Rabbi Yosef Kapach. If you're into Rambam, he's the translator of the Rambam's Moreh Nevuchim. He's the translator of the Rambam's. He did a lot of Rambam work. He wrote a Sefer al Rambam that he desperately wanted to be included in the Frankel Rambam. When it wasn't, his Talmidim were very upset. That was a fight. He was a big Rambam person. He was a dayan on the Rabbanot in Eretz Yisrael. Ad Kedei Kach, when he got a shteller in the Rabbanot in 1950, he was newly emigrated from Yemen. He was a Yassim. His father died, and he came to Eretz Yisrael in 1943. A Yassim, like a 15-year-old boy, a 16-year-old boy. He says in his writings that later were published after his death that he was running away from the Redifus, that the people were being raided of him because he was a Einikel of the Reish Hadardim. And when he got a job in the Rabbanot, the chief rabbi, I think it was Rabbi Yitzchak Nisim or Rabbi Herzog, made him sign a document that he believes in the Zohar. Meaning they made him sign a document that he believes in the Zohar, and without that they wouldn't let him get a job on the Rabbanut, because he came from this muddled heritage of the Dardim. Now, in any case, rather, if you look in the modern day Paiskim Shilas, like it's funny, it still comes up. If you look in Hilchos Yayin Nesach and Simon Kuf Chavav, is it Kuf Chavav? Kuf Chav Dalet? Kuf Chavav? I don't remember exactly. There's a din over there about Mumrim, which Jews' wine is considered Yayin Nesach, and in the modern day Psak Shilas, they all discuss what about a Dardi? If a Dardi pours you wine, could you drink his wine? Now, some Paiskim, like Ben Sion Abba Shaul and others, say that, yes, maybe they have problems with Kabbalah, but at the end of the day, they're not violating any of the actual, Yud Gimel Ikrim, unless you say this is a chelik of the Torah and a Sunni of the Moshe. It's possible, but yeah, they let it. Reb Chaim Kanievsky and Reb Yashiv and Reb Shlomo Zalman say that in each one in their own way. Reb Chaim's talking about wine, Reb Shlomo Zalman's talking about shchita, and Reb Yashiv's talking about maybe a get. They each say that someone who's a Dardi is possible for all these things. Someone who is they don't exist anymore. There is no Kehillah of Dardim anymore. But if one should rear its head, you have to know this halacha, this halacha about them. So it has a halachic nafkamina as well. Now, there's a lot of kolkairis and psakim that were written in those times that are beneficial to us in our discussion over here of the kadmus hazayar and belief in the zayar and amunah in the zayar and treating the zayar like a chelik of Torah Sheba'al Peh, meaning the way we treat it, the way the zayar Kaddish is looked at. Now, the kolkaira, I have a whole letter over here. I'm not going to read from it, but a whole langa letter, a 20-page letter from one Yemeni writing to his uncle who lived in Yerushalayim at the time, telling him what's going on in Yemen. And the story is like off the charts, vild. Meaning that the government was involved, some of them were in prison, they had court cases, they were fighting with each other. It was an arichistic fight that went on in Yemen that really damaged the Kehil over there, because the Muslims who didn't need any great opportunity to look at them like a bunch of fools were happy to look at them like a bunch of fools if they were fighting with each other in this manner. But in any case, this fight was raged on. Now, the kolkara that I want to read from is at some point in this fight, the Yerushalayim Rabbanim got involved. I guess there was a Yemeni Kehil in Yerushalayim already, and the Yerushalayim Rabbanim got involved, and that's where you get some of the like most definitive Kilu pieces that people wrote about the Zayar. So here, they put out kolkara, which is fascinating. Kolkara really a chayrim kolkara. It's a kolkara signed by, these are mostly Rabbanim that you wouldn't have heard of, but about, 90 Sephardic, Ashkenazic, Rabbanim, I don't even know who's on, like everyone from Yerushalayim at the time. And it's Bigzeris, Irin, Ubemeimer Kadishin, Anu Machrimim, Umanadin, Umashamtin, Umakalin, Umaarin, Aldas Hamakam, Aldas Hakol HaKadosh, B'Sefer HaTorah, B'Sheish Meis, Shalosh HaSemitzvah, Aksuvas Boy, B'Cheirim Shechem Yeshua Siricha, B'Klal Shekil Elisha and Arim, Sgechazi. You need translation, or I think we get the point, right? Yeah. This is a chayrim from chayrim land. I'm saying this is like the most extreme chayrim you could write. It goes on and on. B'shem Akasriel, Kashem Tzevakas, Shem Michal Asar Gadol, Shem Matatrin, Sheshmoike, Shem Rabbi, Shem Sandalfin. It's endless and endless. It's a real Yerushalmi chayrim. The way probably only Yerushalayim Yid could do it. With every version of chayrim, because since it's a UN chayrim, meaning it has Sfardim and Ashkenazim, Chassidim, Litvish, so it has every version of klala that any stream of Yiddishkeit would put in. The Sephardi version, the Ashkenazi version, the Chassidish, whatever it is all in there. A total, thorough klala. And what's their punchline? So I missed it over here. Here. Kiyatu anashim b'nei Blial, lachver beiris nishbarim, va'azvim v'kar mayim chayim, v'yadichu b'nei Iram, v'yaku b'lei v'atmimim ha'nemanim l'Hashem. They've sent everyone in their cities, off the rails, and they took the Tmimim who believed everything, and they tricked them, they fooled them. Terasa Akdosha, v'yifaru piyim l'daber sara al sefer hazayir hakadosh latana lekai hakadosh rashbi zuchus yagen aleinu. They were payer piv. They spoke loosely, disgustingly about the sefer hazayir hakadosh latana lekai hakadosh rashbi zuchus yagen aleinu. Val sefer hamakobalim zuchus yagen aleinu. Shenesfarsim uv neskablu b'chol tfusis Yisrael. That when nesfarsim and neskablu in all tfusis Yisrael. Al sefer Shulchan Aruch Hakdoshim. I just want to point out the Shulchan Aruch is like an asterisk at the end over here. What's really bothering them is the Sefer Hazayir, Sefer Kabbalah. The Shulchan Aruch, okay, like you have a different Messiah in Halacha, no. Like that's like the asterisk at the end of the Kolkaira. The Kolkaira, like the main crux of it, is this fight that these Dardim had against the Kabbalah, the Zayir. And this was followed up by a few like more isolated kolkairas. I'll just read from this one because it's signed by Ritzi Pesach Frank, who is, Bakant, everybody here is famous. He says, Gama Bezdin Tzedek Tepai, Hayoy Shiri'inu, Mechtavim Shabo Me'ari Teiman. Sha'osim al Sifrei HaZayar HaKadosh v'Sifrei Kabbalah l'daber sara alei, and people are speaking negatively about this Sifrei ZaYar HaKadosh, Sifrei Kabbalah, v'amachabram, v'gam al Sefer HaShulchan Aruch, plotzes achazasenu. So Mela, kikein b'kayach HaZayar HaKadosh etala, it's a thing, and it's signed by Moshe Nachum Wallenstein, Bar Yilei ben Avram David, I don't know who that is, and Tzvi Pesach Frank. This is the Bezin Yerushalayim at the time, the Ashkenazi Bezin. So all the Batadinim Yerushalayim come up with these Kulkeris in 1915, putting the Dardim and Chayrim for questioning the Zayar HaKadosh. And all Kulam, Pe'ach al Yanu v'Yomru, that the Zayar is from Shimon Yechai, the Zayar HaKadosh and Mela, it's considered a Chelik of Teresh B'Peh, and it's to be believed and trusted, the same as anything else from Teresh B'Peh. Now, maybe we'll circle back to this on a later week. The only thing to discuss, that's left to discuss over here, is what about the Zayar L'gabe Halacha? Do we treat the Zayar in regards to Halacha the same as we treat the rest of the Torah that we have, the Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch, etc.? And maybe that's a separate topic that we'll come back to in regards to treating the Halacha. So now this is just, it took a long time to get to this, but this is just the Hakdama to the way Klal Yisrael adopted the Zayar. Although the Zayar was missing and was hidden from Klal Yisrael for over 1,000 years, Klal Yisrael adopted the Zayar and brought it back to its pride of place, to being the Zayar HaKadosh from Shimon ben Yechai, and treating it with all the reverence that it's due, for what it is. Now, B'negei to learning it. So I think most people here probably never opened the Zayar, or if they did, it was because they saw one on the shelf. It looked interesting. Most people, right? Let's not. What's taka? Are we all supposed to be? Are we not supposed to be? Where is it? So everybody's bakant. There's limitations. Someone has to be maybe 40. He has to be, older, younger. So let's go through this a little bit. I just want to share one line before we move away from the first part. I think this is attributed to the Kotzke. The Kotzke used to say, anybody who's kaifer benigla in the nister is kaifer benister in the nigla. Meaning someone who's comfortable to loudly proclaim that he doesn't believe in the Zayar and the Kabbalah, usually secretly is not believing in the rest of the Torah also. That was the Kotzke's line, take on this whole, his assessment of really the masculine of his generation, which I think is just worth noting. Now, so what about learning the Zayar? So now, there's really two different segments. There's learning the Zayar for real, like learning it, to know it, to understand it, to master it. And then there's learning the Zayar, lowercase learning. Just like reading from the Zayar. Now, there are two different shilas. I want to start with lowercase learning, and then we'll move on to, all caps learning the Zayar. So lowercase learning the Zayar is actually brought down in many, many different places, that even if a person doesn't understand the word that he's saying, and he doesn't know what he's doing, it's an Indian, it's good, he should learn the Zayar, it's helpful, it's gives him Kedusha, and etc. I have the Sefer here from a Sefer called Lev Shemaim. It's published a few times already. I forgot, I don't know if it has a name. The guy who puts it, I think it's one of these nameless, the nameless Svarim. But it does have haskamas from different rabbis. And in it he quotes, even I never heard this, but I'll quote it because it's interesting to me. He quotes that Rabbi Ber Wachtfeigel by Shal Shudis before Lag BaOmer told the Bachram they should make a chabura to learn Zayar on Lag BaOmer. As he brings, he says, B'yeshiva l'fnei harbi bachurim, he says, Zayar is from the Gresta Midrashim, Mendafner Kenan Taichin. Zayar is from the Gresta Midrashim, we just have to know how to teach it. And Heint says easy, because there's the Matzak Midrash, can Green learn in Zayar. It's not a big deal to learn it. There's the Matzak Midrash, we have it over here in Shul. It's easy, Pirish, everybody could learn it. This is the quote that he brings from Shal Shudis in Fallsburg. But he brings many, the Chavetz Chaim, many of Unzer Gedolim. He also brings obviously from the Ramak and the Chida and the Ramchal and the many of them wrote that even if a person does not really understand the words of the Zayar, doesn't really know what he's reading, maybe you should learn it a little bit. It's good for the neshama, it clears the head, it clears the neshama, it's good for the, and the Kutim Aran by Rav Nachman of Breslev, he has that it's good for tznius and helps with certain averis and this, etc., etc. But this is learning lowercase, meaning just to peruse the Zayar, there's definitely many makairis that perusing the Zayar, just reading through it, even if you don't perfectly understand the words, is beneficial to a Jew and is a good thing to do. Some kilis were knowing to make a siyum every Lag BaOmer, they divided it up like into yomi. Read a certain amount of pages of Zayar a day and finish it by Lag BaOmer. Some were makbet to learn it in Miron, Dafka, to go to Miron and learn Zayar. There's many different minhagim in just reading through the Zayar, without even understanding it. It is what it is. Meaning, I don't think let's be honest, it's not something that's widely caught on in our world, but it's something that many Gedolim felt was an acceptable thing to do. Now, what about actually learning Zayar, like to really understand Kabbalah? Maybe that's where the sugya needs to be discussed a little bit more about the limitations. So now here, there's a famous Ramah. It's got a very shver Ramah, but there's a famous Ramah that talks about this that I want to read from. And then there's some more. The Ramah himself wrote in other places, and others wrote more. But let me just read the Ramah. There's a din in Shulchan Aruch Nechas Talmud Torah in Reish Mem Vav. It says as follows: Chayv adam l'shalish limudei shlish b'Torah shebiksav, dainu arba'as and v'shlish b'Mishnah, dainu Torah shebal peh, upirush Torah shebiksav b'chlal zeh, shlish b'Talmud dainu sheyavim v'yaskel achros davim v'rishisei. Person has to split his time between a third of the Torah shebiksav, a third of the Torah shebal peh, and a third of the Gemara. Says the Ramah at the end. The Ramah comes along. The Yesh Omrim, and this he's quoting Rabbeinu Tam in a Taisvus in a few places. Yesh Omrim shebetalmud bavli shu balul b'mikra b'mishnah v'talmud adam yotzi yidei chivasei b'shvel hakol. He's yotzi with everything. Ve'ein la'adam lumid ki mikra mishnah v'talmud. Ve'hem ha'gemara v'apaiskim v'mshach machareim. U'b'zeh yikna ha'olam hazeh v'olam haba. Avalei lumid shara chachmas. Not to learn shara chachmas. B'chol makayim mutter. I printed out the wrong page. B'chol makayim mutter. The Ramah says to learn it a little bit. I need the other page. I need Shulchan Aruch. 1 second. Shulchan Aruch Reish Mem Vav on Yeridea. But the Ramah says you could learn it a little bit. You just can't learn it a lot, because he quotes the Gemara in Chagiga that says a person should be nichnas lepardes if he doesn't, if he's not really prepared. Thank you. Let me just read this. I need the shach also. That's why. Here, the Ramah says. Where am I? Here, Ramah says, "Ve'ein la'adam lilmod ki mikra mishnah v'talmud v'apaiskim v'amshach machareim b'zeh yikna ilam hazeh v'olam haba aval loy b'limud shara chachmas." Not only limud shara chachmas. Mikol makay mutar lilmud ba'akroi b'shara chachmas. You're allowed to learn once in a while in shara chachmas. V'vad shalei yeh sifrei minim, as long as it's not sifrei minim. V'zeh nikra bein hachachamim til b'paradis. This is called til b'paradis. Ve'ein la'adam l'tayil b'paradis rak la'achash amila kreisei basar v'yayin. Now this is the part that everyone knows. The Ramah says a person is only supposed to be walking in the paradise and learning these other things when it's milik kreisei basar v'yayin, when he fills his stomach with wine and meat. Now wine and meat means the Gemara. Who laid the iser v'heter v'dinei mitzvahs, to know all the sugyas, the regular basic limud. Now some people think milik kreisei means when you get a stomachache. When you're done, you just want to go learn. What the Ramah means when milik kreisei, when a person was malak kreisei, then he could go learn. Now what's very strange about this Ramah is that he lumps together Shar Chachmas, which means, let's say, can mean even science and whatever, together with Kabbalah, calls it all paradise and says it's all something that you should only learn when Mila Kreisei. Now, even if those two are both true dinim, that's very strange to lump them all together. And this, the Shach and the Prisha and the Goin very, very harshly, actually. I'll read you this, it's a very harsh Goin. The Goin says that the Ramah is quoting a Rambam. Lashon Harav Einim Mesukin, Shem Zeh Paradise Heich Amar Avaloi V'chulu. There's no bigger kibbutz schar than learning paradise, learning Kabbalah, if that's what it means. Davar katan abayis. One second. Oh, I'm sorry. Who midivei Rambam? He says, "When farish zed dalet shenichasu leparadise, ulchein nenshu shayikulam rabim rachim b'shanim chutz Rabbi Akiva." The Rambam is learning that this is all included in the dalet who nichasu leparadise, and they all got punished because they were too young, except for Rabbi Akiva. The achar Gemara b'nei fine. Aval loy ro es paradise loy hu v'loy harambam. This is what the guy says. Not he or the Rambam that he's quoting saw the paradise. So he doesn't really know what he's talking about. It's an extremely harsh critique that the Goyin has in this Ramah. So Yirchi, it's a Shver Ramah. It needs to be explained. And the Shach has the Kasha, and the Prish has the Kasha. But the Ramah is saying that paradise, even though he's including more things than we would traditionally include in the paradise, are things that a person could learn with limitation at the proper time, at the proper stage. That's what he says. Now the Shach famously adds on. The Shach says that a person should wait. He says... Gam ha-mukubalim v'shar acharnim afligu b'davar. They also, even the mukubalim, very strongly said, "Shalei limud chachmas ha-kabbalah ad achar shemila kreisei me'ashas v'yesh kasvu shalei limud kabbalah ad shiyah ben arba'am shana." There are those who say not to learn until you're 40 years old, and this is a number everybody knows. You shouldn't learn until you turn 40. That's what the Shach says. K'may shkasa ben arba'am lebina. It's not funny. Someone once came to the Satmar Rebbe and he told him, "I'm turning 70. I'm very worried. The Mishnah says ben shivim lezikna. I'm getting old. I don't want to get old." Satmar Rebbe told him, "Don't worry. It also says ben arba'am lebina. That never came. This won't come either." You have nothing to worry about. So whatever. But the Mishnah says ben arba'am lebina. So b'shagam shetzarach, and b'shagam he says shetzarach kedusha v'tahara v'zrizus v'nekiyas l'zeh v'roiva mispartzim lalis b'chachma. This is a frightening thing. The Shach says most people who try to jump the gun and get involved in Kabbalah when they're not up to it, kaidem hazman haroi kaimte b'loy eis. They die prematurely. This is what the Shach says. Shach brings this down. There's a Shach in Shulchan Aruch that people who try to get involved and jump the gun and do it when they're not ready, either roi lekach, in that room, or time, stage, age, they end up getting punished. So this is the famous anchoring bit, where the Ramah and the Shach, and even the Goyin, is not arguing on the core din, he's just arguing on the Ramah's presentation of what's included in it, seem to be saying clearly that learning Kabbalah, to really understand Kabbalah, to really learn the Zohar, that's something that has to be, limited to an age and stage. Now, I can't talk forever, but the Ramah in in Tyrus Ha'olah, which is his more Kabbalah type of sefer. I just want to read you this quote. He says, "V'le'reisi miyamai ish makobel yedeya hadavar al-boyer of mitzad Kabbalah shahayat ha'avel leinayim ki nazar v'chulu." It's too long to read it. But Ramah is saying the same thing. Over there, he just reiterates it more. He says, I've seen all sorts of people who are not properly prepared and they don't know their head from their hand. They don't know what they're talking about. They just read, they learn, they have no shachas what they're talking about. And many other sifrim, even from Chaim Vital and Haktama brings from the Arizal, learning Kabbalah when a person's not ready is not correct. So clearly, the many of the Gedolei HaPoskim and the Gedolei HaMekabalim together, like the Shach Taka quotes, held that to learn Kabbalah, in a real serious way, is not allowed for someone who's not up to the proper level, in age, stage, Yediyas HaTorah, etc. So I guess that explains why, even though many different Svarim say learning the Zohar is moil and neshama and it's good and it's beneficial and it's healthy and it's heilig and it's great for a person, Hayos, the Poskim and the Mekabalim limited it and said you have to be on a certain Ramah in order to learn it. That kept it, I guess, to some distance. I guess only in certain kilas. Some places probably it is much more common, but I'm sure by Chassidim, certain Chassidim for sure, it's more common to get a familiarity in the Zohar. Zikr by a lot of the Yerushalmis, they have like a Shigur Delishan in the Zohar. So, now Pashta, everybody has their own way of approaching this. In any case, this is a little introduction to Zohar. I think next week we'll continue on Zohar and Halacha, meaning when the Zohar and Kabbalah integrates Halacha, when it doesn't. When there's conflict, what do we do? Okay, to be continued.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.